guys, welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please first of all subscribe. But if you don't know, my name is Finn. I am the current WNBF medium British champion in bodybuilding. Reese is laughing at me, so well, he's stood staring at me. So for people that don't know Reese, check him out, check out his channel. You'll see him in this video. People that don't know me, like, subscribe, all that jazz. Today's video is an upper body session at UltraFlex Derby. So yeah, basically sit back, relax, enjoy, and if you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Alright guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. We're here with Big Reese, Big Fat Reese. Nearly 300 pounds now, Big Fat Reese.
I was before bed last night.
Yeah, you can't count. You had shorts on and you were holding your phone.
Yeah, true.
And heavy that phone as well,
yeah.
and your dog. And tonight was on your back. So we're here at UltraFlex Derby. Shout out to UltraFlex Derby. Although, actually, why haven't I been on the TV recently? I haven't been on recently. We haven't been on, have we? Yeah. So not shout out, no shout out actually. We're not here. So I'm doing upper, Reese is doing pull / back. So we're going to start off with the back work, which I do in my back days anyway, my upper days anyway. I prioritise my back, so I have like 4 back movements, 2 push movements on my normal upper days anyway. So starting off with a single arm Nautilus row. I do like this as a row, like it's probably my favourite single arm variant that we have here.
Out of
all the amazing kit we have here. There is the Gym Shop / HD one. They've got the new Prime kit as well, which I'll be doing later on. I don't mind the single arm on the Prime, but to be fair, I do just like this Nautilus compound row. So starting off on this, and then onto some upper back work. So yeah, just follow along. I'll keep you up to date as we go. Enjoy.
UltraFlex Derby. Put this video on.
Yeah, make sure you put it on, guys. So, 2 sets. First set was, I think I got like 9, 10. Second set, slightly higher rep. I don't like to take that any lower than like a 8 to 10 to be fair. Start to take away from that sort of internal feel, like I don't want it to be where I'm just sort of trying to throw it from A to B. I still want to actually engage my lat and connect with my lat, especially with it being the first exercise. Reason that I do this instead of the plate loaded one is the plate loaded one drops off like so much in the short, and especially at this point in the session, like it's just really light. We'd have to put, especially for Reese, we'd have like 10 plates on it. I'd have like 8 plates on it. At this point in the session, do we really want to be chucking loads of plates onto a machine when we're literally in the first exercise? Not really. When we have a pin loaded one available, that challenges that shortened range a little bit more when we're a bit fresher. So that's why we're choosing this instead of the plate loaded.
Scopes. Yeah, that's the homie B.
Yeah, they say that being an artist a producer. That gave me confusion. Cause all of y'all just think y'all really got it, y'all don't do this. When y'all ain't in the studio, y'all just think you're cute shit. With the post on Instagram, that's not how I do this. I'm laughing cause y'all about to lose it. When all of y'all got these things so confused with. Yeah, levels that we on, I do music. All of y'all be petty, man, all of y'all be stupid. Man, I got sauce that I make. I've been in my kitchen like a grandma every day. Man, she really taught me how to cook it, how to wait. Right amounts up on the scale. Man, that's real. Cause I got better speaking.
So 2 sets on the bent over row. I really like this movement, to be fair. It's like a full posterior movement, if you like, in terms of I'm trying to load my erectors, I'm trying to load my entire upper back. Even your lats are going to get a good amount out of it. So being in that hinged over position, obviously you'll see my mid and upper back round quite a lot, but that's actually what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to lengthen my erectors. And also, like, I'm trying to keep the focus through my upper back. I'm not trying to keep my back too straight and basically keep my spine extended and use my erectors throughout. I'm actually trying to lengthen my upper back and let my back round. And then that second set, so I do a heavier set on the 60s, and then a second set slightly lighter on the 55s with a pause to really just emphasize that stretch. So I'll sort of pause and then hang, really sort of search for that stretch before I then, all I'm thinking when I row is literally just trying to drive my shoulder blades together, and I just let my elbows do whatever they want. So it's literally drive my scapula back and my elbows will just follow. They're going to be, if anything, you'll probably see it's like almost like a bit of a semi-pronated grip, so I'm not like fully pronated and rowing up here. It's like a semi-pronated grip and I'm rowing almost here. My elbow's a bit tighter to my torso, just based on the fact that where it feels natural for me to pull through my scapula, my elbows just fall here basically, rather than right up there. So yeah, 2 sets on that, and that's the sort of main movement in this session really. Obviously I've got some presses. The meat and potatoes of this session. It is a good movement. Like, the reason I do dumbbells instead of barbells, because obviously the barbell's fixed, and I have like quite a bad imbalance between my right and my left side in terms of like size and strength, and like this left side's always a bit off. So doing the dumbbells and having that sort of isolateral control, each side independent of each other, just feels a lot more comfortable for me. Right guys, so third movement is another back movement, just because we're here now near the cable, so I'm just going to get my back stuff done and then I'll head on to my push work. So obviously we had the single arm row, which is more of like a lat focused movement. Then we've got the dumbbell row, which like I said is like my whole back. You don't need to think about exactly where I'm trying to pinpoint, it's my whole back. And then, but this is my whole back. And then for the, it's too fair, it's like an RDL, so it was hip extension. It was glutes and hamstrings. And then we've got the upper back pull down, which to be fair, again, is not just my upper back. Like, I'm gonna get some lats on this, I'm gonna get some rear delts, I'm gonna get some teres major, I'm gonna get some traps, some mid traps, some rhomboid. I'm literally just, it's like a very high angled row. So I'm here, I'm allowing my scapula to protract, and I'm thinking to drive my shoulder blades back and down, like a pull up, for example, bringing my chest through the middle. So I've kind of got a row from this angle, and then I've almost got a row from this angle, even though it's a pull down, but it's no different to a row. You just got it's visually the same thing. I'm just laying back slightly and I'm pulling down rather than pulling up from here. It's the same kind of thing. And then obviously we've got the lat row. So with those 3 movements, I've pretty much hit everything I need to in terms of my back work within this upper session. Depending on how my back feels towards the end, I might do a little bit more. I usually kind of decide as I go. But yeah, with those 3 movements, you can't really go too wrong. Some form of single arm row, or some form of row where your elbows are tucked in quite tight and you're not really pulling through your scap. Some form of row where you are pulling through your scap. Some form of pull down where you are kind of pulling through your scap. You could argue some form of single arm pull down without as much scap movement, but it's very similar. Like this and this, it's the same kind of thing. So I would rather do something a little bit different. So those 3 movements are all, they're not too similar. Yeah, they're all doing slightly different things. Whereas if I was to do a single arm pull down and a single arm row, if I'm in a back session solely, I would do that. But in an upper session where I've got less time to do as many back movements, I'd rather do these 3 instead of doing the single arm pull down as well.
You know what would be a good real idea, Sam? You know, like Finance's, like he explains it, and I'm just a 16 TikTok kid who's like, what, lat bias, upper back bias? And you're like, you just carry on, and I'm like, upper back, rear delts.
What does that mean?
Where's your single arm pull down? And you just start saying the shit that just doesn't need to be asked. Like, no one cares if you have muscle. But people don't have muscle, like, what's this about? You got a little bit of muscle. Your back, maybe not as much.
Right.
But a little bit.
Might be coming back. So 2 sets on the prime shoulder press. First set just loaded on the mid pin. Second set loaded all on the top pin. Now I could be a little bit more technical with it, and if I'm doing 3 sets I usually would be, but I'm just dropping volume a little bit in this session based on just general fatigue. So basically I'm just going to match the same weight on the mid as the top on the second set. Top pin means it's going to be more challenging in the lengthened, it's going to drop off more in the shortened where we're weaker. So it makes sense as you progress through your sets to put more load towards the top pin. I wouldn't ever really use the bottom pin unless you maybe have an injury which is causing a lot of pain in the lengthened range, in which case prime kit can be quite helpful to still train safely and challenge the shortened range more. But also you have other pieces of equipment that could do that, like Nautilus or hammer strength, for example. But yeah, basically with the ability to adjust the profile on the prime kit, I quite like to just progressively add more to the lengthened range as you fatigue. Dependent on the time in the session as well, dependent on the exercise, there's not a one rule fits all in terms of the loading profiles, but as you progress through the sets, progressively look to put more towards that mid to lengthened range where you're stronger. As you fatigue throughout a session, your ability to really get those reps short is going to get a little bit worse. So earlier in the session, you can put a bit more on that mid pin. Later in the session or later in the sets, put more towards the top pin. With the load on the top pin, it's very hard here. So you have to be really, really efficient with your bracing. Like if you're not tight through your core, if you haven't got a strong brace, you'll just die out at the bottom and you'll have to either dead stop every single rep or you'll just completely lose out on the set. So make sure that you're bracing really, really well. So breathing in on the eccentric, bracing your core as hard as you can, thinking to sort of that air that you've just sucked into your midsection, you're pushing that against your abs, you're contracting your abs like you're gonna get hit. That brace and that drive through the floor is gonna help you change direction. Also, another tip, if you like, when you are loading the prime kit on the top pin, don't spend ages on the lockout because it's easy there. There's no real challenge there. So if you watch that set back, you'll see that I was almost coming up to about 90% lockout and I was straight back into it. So I'm not going to call them lengthened partials because they're not. It's just a continuous set. I'm not locking out until I really, really need to for the last 1 or 2 reps. And I'd actually recommend that you do that on pretty much anything within your training. There's very few, if any, exercises where I'd recommend locking out and spending ages at the top of each rep and trying to sort of break it into 1 rep maxes. Every exercise, especially an exercise which is heavily loaded in the lengthened, don't waste loads of time on that lockout. If you're locking your joints out, even on an exercise that's hardest in the short, like let's say something like a hammer strength incline, even if you're locking out against your joints, there's not really much challenge there because the load is just stacked through your shoulder, your elbow and your wrist joint. So minimize your time spent at lockout. Think of it as like a rest. We're not trying to rest between the set. Last 1 or 2 reps, fair enough, but even then, don't spend too long there. Majority of the set, just keep it as continuous as you can. Right guys, so as you can see here, I have a seat belt that I'm using for a chest press, which is a little bit unorthodox, a little bit weird, but it helps me drastically lock into this. So if you have any kind of chest press machine that generally you're pressing on a decline, often you'll find that your hips come up because obviously the load is almost underneath you. So this works on a very slight decline. So the bottom of the rep, I'm here. Yeah, so my sort of center of mass and weight is above where the loading is. Whereas if you're on an incline press, like this behind me for example, obviously it pushes your weight down. If you're on a shoulder press, it pushes your weight down. So you don't really need to stabilize your hips. If you're doing any form of decline or even a flat press, I'd recommend getting yourself a seatbelt, locking your hips in. because I guarantee you feel a lot more stable and you can generate a lot more force. So with this press, it's really, really heavy in the length, and like I said about the prime loading it on the top pin, it's very heavy in that length and range. So again, your bracing is very important. That control and respecting the weight when changing direction is very important. You can't just drop into it and expect to bounce out, because you're just going to end up hurting yourself if you're not careful. So first set, I like to still keep it relatively higher rep. Like anything below like a 6 to 8 on this just won't feel nice for me. So I like to keep it like above an 8. That first set was a 10. And I'm still dropping it by 15 kilos per side on this second set. Now I could probably go heavier and do maybe 3 and a 5, or I could do 3 plates, but what I'm going to do with this second set is I'm going to really emphasize that stretch, and I'm going to pause here for a good 2 count. Really emphasize that stretch, sit into it, get as much of a stretch through the pecs as I can before then pressing into it. So if you like, you know, if you're thinking of it as like a top set, back off set approach, that top set, that heavy set, I'm basically just putting as much load through my chest with good form as I can. That second set, I'm focusing on, I don't really worry as much about the loading. I'm thinking about make sure that the muscle that I'm trying to train is doing every single ounce of this exercise, and I'm not letting sort of other auxiliary body parts take over. So, got a lying lateral as my main sort of lateral movement. To be fair, I rotate my lateral movements. Similar to like when I do a fly in my push session, I don't do the same fly every single time. I'll just do what I fancy doing. Sometimes I might do the Nautilus decline, sometimes I might do the Nautilus flat, sometimes I might get on some cables, sometimes I might do like a dumbbell in the sort of length and range. Kind of depends on what's available and what I fancy. Something that I think people get too sort of concerned about is having to do the exact same thing for every single exercise, every single session. And for the big compound movements, yes, like I wouldn't come in today and be like, oh, what do I fancy for my main row? I'm going to do the dumbbell row. I could do that in any gym really that has dumbbells heavy enough. I've got loads of kit here, but I'm still going to do the dumbbell row. We've got the prime extreme row, they've got the prime seated row, but I'm going to do the dumbbell row because that's my main movement for this session. Now, when it comes to things like isolation work, laterals, I'll do what I fancy doing. Make sure that I get a good connection, make sure that I get a good pump, and that's the main real focus. Obviously, I want to get stronger on these movements over time as well, but because they are muscle groups that aren't going to be able to deal with the same amount of load. For example, I'm not going to be lateral raising the 60s like I was rowing, because my side delts are a much smaller muscle group than my entirety of my back. So in terms of that progressive overload component, I'm focusing on ensuring I'm getting a really good connection, a really good pump, and I finish the sets knowing that my side delts have got as much out of it as I can. If I do that, I'm happy, whether or not I do it on a cable or a machine or with dumbbells. So a couple of benefits to this specific exercise. So you've got the fact that it forces you into the scapular plane. So it basically forces your forearm and your humerus to be slightly ahead of the body. So one sort of common mistake or common issue that I see with lateral raises is people trying to do them too much directly to the side, so in the frontal plane, and then they start sort of either shrugging into it a lot or recruiting a lot of rear delt instead of actually working in what's called the scapular plane, slightly ahead of the body. So when I'm here, it's almost impossible for me to retract and shrug into it, and it's also very hard for the rear delts to take over, especially if I'm thinking about angling my thumbs towards the cable stack. If I think about lifting my thumbs upward, then my front delts are likely going to take over because they have a sort of direct line of force upward. If I angle my thumbs slightly towards and internally rotate, that's going to keep that tension sort of more so through the side delt. So that's why I quite like this exercise. It forces you into that position. And also with the profile, it's harder in that length and range, in that stretch, and it drops off more towards the short, like I was saying earlier, where we're weaker. Right guys, so we have the Bayesian curl, as I love to call it. Basically behind the body curl, but we've actually added the bench for extra stability. So basically, I've posted about this before. It's one of my favorite bicep exercises, either single arm or dual arm. Basically got the humerus behind the torso, so we're in shoulder extension. We're fully lengthening that bicep behind the body, really challenging through that stretch, and then it drops off as you get into the shortened range. With the bench, you get the best of both worlds in terms of the same thing, in terms of getting a great stretch. If anything, you can get into more shoulder extension. You can really drive the humerus behind the body because of the bench being here, and you can get a huge stretch, but with the extra stability driving against the bench, so you can actually add more load to it as well. So if you haven't tried this before with the bench, I would definitely give it a go. Batters my elbows. So I was literally saying to Sam and to Reese off camera that I'm just in the last few days starting to feel a little bit more trashed. And one of the telltale signs for me is, I always have niggles and injuries to work around, we all do. But when they start to flare up a lot more, and when I start to really notice them and constantly I'm in a bit of pain, that's when I'm like, okay, my body's probably not recovering very well. Waking up feeling a little bit more tired, that's another sign. Last few reps within a set, instead of being let's get after it, being that doesn't feel great, or thinking about, these are feeling really hard. That's for me the telltale signs to either take that devolume or that deload. Usually if it's very much a case of the niggles, the joints starting to flare up a lot, usually a couple of days, 2-3 days off can sort that. 2 days off, 2 sessions off, 4 days off in a row can sort that. So that'll be the plan probably this coming weekend. But yeah, it's more so a case of when I feel physically tired. So if in your sessions you're oh, I'm a bit tired, get over it. Yeah, you can maybe auto-regulate your volume a little bit, or just crack on. It's okay being tired. But when it's I'm constantly feeling like I'm injured and my joints hurt all the time, feel more tired, appetite's dropping off, struggling to get a pump, they're all big signs that you're pretty trashed and you probably need to take a deload or just take a little bit of time away. Right guys, so as a good tricep isolation movement, so obviously you're going to be doing within any push session or upper session, you're probably going to be doing a couple of presses. So your triceps are going to be involved, but I still like to have maybe 1 or 2 isolations. So this is one of my favorites, where it's basically an overhead single arm extension, but it's not directly overhead. You see a lot of people sort of doing it like this, or they're here and oh, it feels really uncomfortable. So what we're actually trying to do is we're basically trying to align the cable path with the humerus. So my upper arm and the cable basically want to be within a line of each other. So I'm not trying to be here and it feels really awkward. I'm here. It's challenging this lengthened range again where we're stronger. And as I press out, it drops off because the moment arm is shorter. So the distance between the load and my joint gets shorter as I press. So here it's quite hard. Here it starts to drop off, which is exactly the profile that we want, especially at this point in the session when we're already pretty fatigued after the presses on the triceps. Right guys, so that is a wrap on the upper session. So as I said, basically had 3 main back movements, 2 main push movements, a lateral biceps, triceps. Simple as that. 2 to 3 sets on each, generally 2 sets on the compounds, 3 sets on the isolation, so basically the laterals, the biceps and the triceps at the end. So because of my strengths and weaknesses in my physique, I have the back work earlier on when I'm a bit fresher because my back shots are weaker than my front shots. Really simple. So if you're somebody who is in the same kind of boat, maybe the other way around, then put the emphasis, the priority earlier in the session on your weaker body parts. But yeah, that's a wrap. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, especially if you're new. If there's anything you want to see, comment or drop me a message. Follow me on Instagram if you're not already. Follow the Once You're In podcast as well. And I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.